presentation about 4 years ago. Some stuff has changed, some stuff has not changed. We're going to dive right in because there's a lot to go through, and I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. At the very end, I'll answer questions from everybody. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat, and let's get started. All right, so that's me. I'm the creator of The Shelf Life, which is a podcast sitcom. It's in the style of like old 90s sitcoms with it has a laugh track in it. I made certain that I wanted that in there. And then I'm also the co-host of the Homework podcast on the 5x5 network. And like Melissa said, that's a two-person show where we talk about, how to be productive, how to work from home better, how to set boundaries between work and life, and just sort of, keep on top of things. And that comes out once a week. The Shelf Life is currently on hiatus, but the whole first season is available to listen to in Apple Podcasts and other places. So what is a podcast? Put it simply, it is a digital audio file that you can download from the internet. That's it. There's really nothing special. Some really popular examples are Serial, which a lot of people say kicked off the podcast explosion. I'm not so sure I agree with that, but it definitely brought them more mainstream. There's WTF with Mark Maron, which is a popular internet show. And there's Lore, hosted by Aaron Mahnke, who's also my boss on Cabinet of Curiosities. But that has been a huge success, and it spawned an Amazon series and a couple of other shows on iHeartMedia and different places. So, podcasting, a lot of networks right now are seeing podcasting as a way to broaden their intellectual property and break into other things because, anyone, be it a large network or a person like me who's doing it on their own, or someone like you who's just getting started, podcasting is sort of a democratization of content creation. You can do it on your laptop with a simple $50 microphone and put something on the internet that thousands of people will listen to, or you can be a major network like Gimlet or NPR and put in millions of dollars or thousands of dollars into creating a piece of intellectual property that will go on to great success. So, it runs the gamut. So where do you find podcasts? You can find them mostly on Apple Podcasts. That's the first little note icon on the left there. And that was really the grandfather of them all. It started with Apple. The word podcast comes from iPod. They kicked it off. Their directory is the largest and the most popular. But you can also find them on Spotify. You can find them on Stitcher, which was recently bought by Sirius. So you'll probably be hearing podcasts on Sirius XM soon too. The Android store, SoundCloud, and then you can go straight to a podcast's website, get an RSS feed, and put it into your podcatcher of choice and listen to it that way. They usually come out on a set schedule. They're automatically downloaded to your podcatcher, so you don't have to keep going back and getting them. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. But for the most part, Apple Podcasts, iTunes is really where a lot of people get their start in podcasting and listening to podcasts. So why would you want to start a podcast? Well, perhaps you have a passion that you want to share with people, that you want to bring together with similar interests. There's another podcaster and author. His name's Merlin Mann. He has this notion that, anybody can make a podcast about Star Wars or a blog about Star Wars, but only one person, you could be that person who makes that podcast or that blog about that Jawa in A New Hope. And you're the go-to person for that Jawa, and you know everything about them. So if you have a passion about Game of Thrones, or if you have a passion about some TV show or Apple or something, you can make a podcast about it, and maybe you want to dive a little deeper. You have a passion about one particular aspect about it, and that's where you carve your niche. So that's one way. You want to share information. Maybe you're an expert in a particular field and you want to share this information, and no one's going to read your blog posts, but maybe they'll listen to your podcast once a week. Maybe you want to talk to other people and bring them on to talk about their passions and what they're knowledgeable about. Podcasting is a great way to do that. And maybe, like me, you want to tell a story, whether it's nonfiction, like true crime podcasts like Serial, or if it's fiction, like A Shelf Life, or Marvel has a bunch of podcasts that follow Wolverine and different characters. You have a story to tell, and you want to tell that story in a creative and interesting way. Podcasting is a great way to do that. And it's a way to gain confidence. Maybe you're not a great public speaker. You're not great at talking to people, or maybe you have to interview someone for your job or something, and you want to get better at it. So you start an interview podcast where your job is to talk to people and ask questions. It's a great way to start doing that and getting practice for it. So, how to create a podcast. There's Game of Thrones again. Is your idea strong enough to last? If you make a podcast about a television show, is it going to last beyond the television show's existence? There are tons of Game of Thrones podcasts, but how many have withstood the test of time and maybe dove into the books or talked about other aspects of Game of Thrones beyond the television series? If it can last more than 3 episodes, great. If it can last more than 30 episodes, even better. But you need to make sure that it will stand the test of time and you'll be able to keep it going even when that topic you're talking about has run its course. You want to go narrow versus broad. Like I said before with the Java example, how deep do you want to go on this? If your idea is too narrow, it won't gain a wide enough audience, which might be fine. You might have a very particular target audience that you want to hit. But if it's too broad, you're going to have trouble narrowing down a focus, and you might not be able to differentiate yourself. I mean, look at all of these Game of Thrones podcasts. Which one are you supposed to listen to? This is something you're passionate about, and you're not alone in your ideas. You want to focus on something. You want to make sure that you deliver a quality product, and if you love it and that love and that passion comes out in the audio, then they're going to love it too. And that's something I found with what I've created as well. Time. It is more than a flat circle. The length of your podcast matters. What the audience expects each week. If you put out a half-hour show one week, it should be a half hour or near that the next week. If you put out a half-hour show one week and a 2.5-hour show the next week, it's a little all over the map, and they might not tune in. They might skip an episode. So make sure you're consistent in what you produce. And in terms of consistency as well, stick to a set schedule. If you come out once a week, every Monday at 8 a.m., make sure you come out every Monday at 8 a.m. If you miss a day, if you miss a week or two, that's going to be a problem, and people might unsubscribe, they might stop listening, or they might be asking, where's the episode? I've been waiting for it. So, make sure that you have enough ideas in the hopper, you have your episodes prepared so that you don't miss that schedule. So like I said, your show should come out on a set schedule. I listen to some podcasts that come out every day. I listen to some podcasts that come out once a week. And there's some that are big enough, that they're involved enough that they take longer. So they come out maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month. Make sure that your show adheres to a set schedule and sticks to that schedule. And if you do change your schedule, if let's say you're doing it every 2 weeks, but something changes, you want to start doing it once a week, let your audience know. Maybe release a smaller episode that's just an announcement that says, hey, just so you guys know, or put it as a stinger at the end of an episode. We're going to start going to once a week. Stay tuned. Plan ahead. So with the shelf life, I wrote and collected all the audio files, all the voiceovers, had everything edited together for the first 4 episodes, and I planned on releasing once a week starting in, I believe, mid to late March. And I thought that was enough lead time. There were only going to be 8 episodes in the first season. I wasn't worried about missing it or falling behind. Lo and behold, I launched the first episode of the 4, and I started getting delays from the audio, from my voice actors, and it wasn't their fault. Life got in the way. The pandemic got in the way. And so the last 2 episodes, we're getting a thunderstorm. The last 2 episodes were late by, I believe, a week each, which wasn't ideal. I wasn't thrilled with it, but most of my audience knows me. They knew it was coming. I was providing regular updates. So just be aware that you should have, enough episodes on deck that you don't miss a week. And if you go on vacation, you're releasing once a week, maybe record a double episode that you can release while you're on vacation so you don't miss that week. Build a workflow. That's one thing I missed. Build a workflow. Make sure, you can set up templates in a lot of editing software where your intro music, your outro music, any kinds of other audio can be set up and ready to go. And all you have to do is drop in your audio and you're good to go. Do that kind of workflow. It makes it a lot easier to keep going. We'll get into software later and all that kind of stuff, but it's something to keep in mind when you're starting your show. And then building an audience. When you set a schedule and they know when to expect your show, they'll tell others, and others will know to expect your show on that day at that time. You know, that's really what helps build the audience, the consistency, the regularity, every day, every week, every 2 weeks, doing this and sticking with it. If you fade out after 3 or 4 episodes because you weren't getting enough listeners, you're not alone. Thousands and thousands and thousands of podcasts exist out there, and you need to be dedicated to it if you want any chance of building any kind of audience for yourself. You know, the overnight successes, the lores of the serials. I mean, Serial came from NPR basically, and that already had a huge backing. Lore was an overnight and basically an overnight success. I mean, Aaron is fantastically talented, and what he built was great, but what he built is not the norm. And so you just need to be aware that when you go into this, you know, you're going to be sticking with it. You want to stick with it because it's not going to be instant. It probably won't, I should say. All right, tools of the trade. This is where we talk about the toys. So there are microphones. There are 3 different levels of microphone in terms of price. There's the $50 to $150 range, and that's the Blue Snowball or the Samson Q7, which is what I'm using right now. The $150 to $300 range, which is like the Blue Yeti, the Rode NT1-A. These are more mid-range microphones if you've been doing it for a little while and you want to beef up your sound quality. And then there's like the $300 plus, top of the line, and you can go into $500, $600, $700. I mean, there's one microphone. It's called the Heil, and that's a $3,000 mic. That's what they use on NPR. I mean, that's forget that. I don't know any pro podcaster who would use a mic like that, but you can if you have the income to do it. So fantastic. But you know, you can build a podcast with a $50 Blue Snowball, which is what I did years ago, and work your way up to something a little more high quality. USB versus XLR. USB plugs right into the computer. XLR is like a standard microphone cable that you would see in a band or something. And so in order to use that, you would need to plug it into an interface that would plug into the computer, and we'll talk more about that. And then there's condenser versus dynamic. So condensers can be a little more expensive. They're very, very, very sensitive. The Blue Yeti, for example, will pick up every single background sound in the area. So if you're in a room like mine where you can hear the thunderstorm outside, you're going to hear the thunderstorm on your recording. So just be aware. The dynamics, they're a little bit cheaper, but they're focused. So they will only pick up what's right in front of them. I'm using a dynamic mic right now. I'm talking right into it. So I would hope my audio right now sounds pretty good. So USB versus XLR. USB, like I said, it plugs right into the computer. You shouldn't need drivers for it. It should just be plug and play. It's one cord. It's not a whole bunch of cords sticking out the back of your mic or your computer. Pretty inexpensive. Like I said, the Blue Snowball is about $50. It's a great beginner microphone. It is a condenser, so it is very sensitive, but there are settings on it where you can adjust how it picks up the sound. So there's a setting for like a lecture hall, which will pick up everything around it. And there's a setting where you're talking right into it, which is a little less sensitive. The problem with the USB mics is that if you have multiple people in the same room recording the same show, the computer won't really be able to detect what microphone is what, and what it should be picking up. So you run into a risk where you're going to have competing microphones and weird audio issues. So that's where I would say go with an XLR and some sort of hub or interface to negotiate or reconcile the 2 different tracks that you're recording. So XLR, it does require a separate interface, and I'll show you what that looks like on one of the next slides. And it gives you a little more control. You can control the volume of each mic individually. It has a headphone jack for monitoring what you hear. So that's very helpful. It does add cost. You know, if the mic's $50 or $100, the audio interface can range anywhere from $70 to $150. So it does add cost, but it does improve your sound quality. And it does give you more control, like I said. So these are the mics. So that Blue Snowball right there, $50, great starter mic. That's what I started with. I moved up to a Blue Yeti when I had been doing it for a couple of years. That Audio Technica is also very good, very popular podcasting mic. So any of these 3 are great to start out with, but if you're brand new to it, you're not sure you want to keep doing it, or you might not have the income right now to really dive in and go head first on an XLR mic, that Blue Snowball is fantastic. And I gave mine to a friend who was getting into podcasting, and they loved it. They used it for a long time. And then these are the XLR mics. There's the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X. That's really popular. The Rode Procaster is a more professional model. Rode is a very popular brand for podcasters. The boom arm I'm using for my microphone is made by Rode. And then the Shure SM7B is another standard for like pro podcasters. So like I said, you get a little more expensive into these, but you know, when you move up to that level, you do get what you pay for.
Harry, they're actually saying that they're hearing some static off of you on your end. I don't know if it's because there's this thunderstorm rolling through, but someone's saying they are hearing some static when you're talking.
It might be the storm. I did notice my computer screen dimmed a little bit, like a not a brownout, but we're getting close to it. So I don't know if that's the case.
That's what I'm guessing, but I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Okay, yeah, no, don't take the static as a sign of poor audio quality on my side. This storm is something fierce. So going into condenser versus dynamic, like I said, they're very sensitive. You do get a higher fidelity with a condenser mic, so you do get a better quality sound. It can require more power. It's called phantom power, so you might need a separate cord running into a wall or running into your computer to power it, and it does record at multiple angles. The dynamic, like I said, less sensitivity, records what's in front of it. It can stand up to pressure and moisture a little better. So, you know, if you're spitting into it, or if you're doing it out in the weather, it'll hold up a little better, and in the humidity as well. It does tend to be cheaper. I think the mic I'm using ran me about $70, so it's about the price of a beginner USB mic, but it's an XLR mic, and yeah, one angle of recording. So, before I forget, with the condenser mics, if you do choose as a condenser mic, I would look at investing in some sort of sound barrier. So eggshell material or batting, padding, something to put behind the microphone so that you can block out as much background noise as possible. They make booths. You can even make one out of a milk crate and some, air conditioning insulation padding material. I've made a couple of homemade backings so that I can block out the sound from behind my mic, because those condenser mics will pick up everything. All right, so this is an audio interface. It's similar to the one I use. If you have an XLR mic, you have to use one of these. There's no way to plug into one second. There we go. You have to plug into this, because there's no way to plug an XLR mic into your computer. That monitor dial in the front will control what you hear in your headphones and the volume of that. There's a headphone jack there, and you can control the individual volume of each microphone. So if the person you're talking with is really loud, you can lower their input, their gain. And if you're a soft talker, you can increase yours, and so you balance each other out. So XLR mics are a great way if you have two different dynamics you're working with and you want to regulate them. So like I said, more control, and you can record multiple tracks at once, which is great for in-person podcasts. I don't know when we're all going to get to do in-person podcasts again, but if you live with someone you want to do a podcast with, this is a great way to do it. And like I said, built-in headphone jack. You wouldn't use the headphone jack on your computer. You want something where you can hear both your recording and what you are recording, so the other person on the other end. So right now I have a pair of headphones over my ears that I can hear my voice, and I can hear Melissa, and I can hear anything else going on, whatever the microphone's picking up. And these are some different accessories you can get. I highly suggest a pop filter. That's that first one here, that big net-looking thing on the curvy stick. This clips on, it goes in front of the microphone, and it stops the plosives, the P's, the T's, the buzz from blowing out the sound on your mic. It catches the air and diffuses it. Right next to it are some acoustic panels that will dampen the sound around you. There are YouTube videos galore on how to properly place these in your room, in your office, in your studio, wherever you are, so that you can get the best sound possible and block out as much around you. And this last one, boom arm and shock mount. So the boom arm, the one in this picture, is the exact one I have on my desk. It's the Rode Podcaster boom arm. And then the shock mount, what it does is when you bang the table, if you're sitting on a tripod, if your microphone is sitting on a tripod and you bang the table or you're typing, it's going to pick up all of that sound as little in your recording. You don't want that. So the shock mount sort of holds the microphone in the middle of everything on these bungee cords, and keeps those little bangs and knocks from getting into your recording. So I highly suggest getting some sort of boom arm and a way to elevate the mic off the desk. So let's talk about hosting providers. So your podcast, you've created it, you've recorded it, it needs to go somewhere. There are two options, free and paid, as with everything. The positives about free, it doesn't cost anything, which is great. Unfortunately, with free, you do get what you pay for. If you want a personal domain like susiesnewpodcast.com, usually if you have a free hosting provider, they're not going to let you bring your own domain over, and they're not going to provide you with your own domain. So you would have to use whatever the hosting provider's URL is to share with people. You don't get a lot of analytics on how your show is doing. You might get number of downloads, but you won't get where they're being downloaded, what countries, how many listens per episode, where people drop off if they listen to the whole thing or if they stop listening after a while, that you would get if you were paying for hosting. There are download limits. Usually for certain free tiers, you might get up to, a gigabyte of bandwidth for downloads. And if your show does really well and you blow through that bandwidth, then you're going to have to start paying so people can listen to your show. And the same thing for uploads. A lot of free hosts will limit how much you can upload per audio file. You might get 500 megabytes total. So your show, let's say the average hour-long podcast is 30 megabytes, you're going to hit that wall pretty quick, and then you're going to have to start paying for hosting. So just be aware of that. With a paid subscription, you get more control over how your audio is uploaded, what the quality can be. You get more robust analytics. Like I said, you can see what countries people are downloading your show from. You can see, lifetime of the show. You can see the arc of how the show has performed over the last 30 days, 90 days, a year. You do get greater longevity. Usually a paid service will last a lot longer than a free service because you're paying for it. They have money, they have income, they can keep going. You get more space. You might get a gigabyte of space. You might get where you might have 50 megabytes of upload space per month. They might give you 150 megabytes per month, which is perfect because if you're releasing one show a week, you won't hit that wall as quickly as you would on a free account. And shorter upload times as well. A free account might throttle your bandwidth so that your show, which would have taken 2 seconds on a paid subscription, will now take 10 minutes on a paid subscription to upload. And then certain podcast hosts like Libsyn, which is what I host with, they'll automatically submit you to Google and iTunes so that you don't have to do all that manual labor yourself. So these are the free options that exist now. There's SoundCloud, which is very popular. Podbean, Spreaker, Podomatic, Buzzsprout. They all offer different things, but there are a lot of similarities among them. For example, Buzzsprout will only give you 2 hours of recording time per month. And it will only host your show for 90 days. After 90 days, your show, the episodes you've uploaded will be removed automatically until you start paying for the service. And they'll put ads on the little microsite they make for your podcast. Podomatic will give you 500 megabytes for free. It's hosted forever. You can record and publish straight from your iPhone or Android phone. They have an app where you can actually record right into the phone and upload right away. I don't always recommend that because the quality won't be great, but you can do it if you're doing a field recording or something. And they give you basic stats for it. Spreaker gives you quite a bit. 5 hours of audio storage. They can host multiple shows of yours. You can do a live podcast for 15 minutes where people can use a chat room and talk to you during the show. So there's some interesting options there. That's Spreaker. And then SoundCloud, you get 3 hours of audio storage, period. Once you hit that wall, that's it. You can't get any more until you start paying. And you get basic stats. Once you go pro and you start paying for it, you can get more storage, you get more advanced statistics, and you can even earn money from the people who listen to your show, which is pretty cool. These are the paid options. Libsyn is probably the most popular. It's definitely one of the oldest. It's been around for a long time. I host my shows with it. I really like it. And you get what you pay for, and that works both. You're paying for a quality service, but also the more you pay, the more you get. For example, your stats and your storage get better the more you pay. So I'm paying about $20 a month to host the Shelf Life, and I get really, really good statistics that show me countries where people are downloading it, number of downloads, lifetime downloads, where people are seeing my show, like what podcast apps they're using to view it, if it's Apple Podcasts or Overcast or something. So I can get a lot of insight into how my show is performing. And Blueberry is another one. They have a WordPress plugin. So if you have a WordPress site for your podcast, you can integrate this and automatically upload. And with theirs, you get more storage based on how much you pay. And their professional level gets you dynamic ad insertion and monetization. So they'll put ads in your show for you, and then you get a cut of those ads later. So do you need a website? We talked about website. This is the first page of the Shelf Life homepage. It's a personal preference. Like I said, certain hosting providers like Libsyn will provide you with a microsite for your show. So if you don't need a website for your show, if you want to use the hosting provider's microsite, go for it. It's really up to you. Like I said, they send microsites for your show. There is a downside with that, unless they allow you to use your own private domain, like shelflifesit.com. You're going to have to use, it's like libsyn.com/podcast/show/ the name of your show.html. So if you want to put that on a sticker or a business card or something, be aware that's the URL you're going to be sharing with them. So, maybe you want a website that you can send to people to look at your show, where you can, you don't have to use that long, weird URL to give to them. It can enhance the brand. The more places you are on the internet, the more people can find you, the better your Google ranks will be. If you can see, it's a sort of a small screenshot, but you can see an about page. There's a cast list here. So if you go to the cast page on the Shelf Life's webpage, you'll see pictures and bios of the voice actors in my show, which is what I wanted. I didn't want to use just the Libsyn microsite. I wanted a place where people could go and learn more about my show and the people who make it. So that might be something for you too. If there's a lot involved in your show, you want a place where they can go to get everything. That's that. So what kind of show do I want to make? There are a lot of different kinds. There's the solo show where it's literally just you talking into a microphone. There's panel discussions, let's say you want to do The View, but as a podcast. There's the interview show. I hosted an interview show. It was a literary interview show several years ago. It was called Covered, where I would talk to authors about their books. And it was me once a week talking to a different author about the writing process, about their book. Maybe that's something you want to do. Audio narratives, so stuff like true crime, serial. Let's say you want to do a version of like I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which is on HBO now. But you want to do something where there's a story to tell, a nonfiction story to tell, and you want to talk to people and interview people and add cool music and sound effects. That's one way to do it. Fiction, advice show, audio drama, call-ins. That was a weird character that copied over. There's a ton of different ways to do a podcast, and it's really up to you and what you're passionate about. If you're passionate about talking to people and learning from people, maybe you want to do an interview show. If you want to create worlds of your own and build an audio world, maybe you want to do a fiction show. So it's really up to you. Editing. Not everybody edits their show, which is kind of surprising. A lot of people they record and they upload, or they record, they add a little music at the beginning, and they send it up to the cloud, and it's ready to go right there. That's a personal preference. I edit my shows like you wouldn't believe. Homework is a pretty easy thing for me right now. It's about an hour each week to put together. So we might only record for 45 minutes, but I'll need to strip out the background noise from each audio track. I need to line up our feeds together so that we are in sync and it sounds like I might make minor edits, like if my kid walks into the room and I need to shoo him away, I'll cut that minute or two out and clean it up a little bit and tighten things. And removing an interruption or a stray cough or just little audio nits here and there. It takes about an hour to put together. I add the music and I send it up and publish it. That's fine. The Shelf Life took me, each episode is roughly 8 to 10 minutes, and it takes me about 2 to 3 hours to assemble everything. Because I'm working with maybe 4 to 6 voiceovers. I'm including sound effects, I'm including laugh tracks, and I have to make sure everything lines up perfectly. The laugh fits the joke. So that takes a lot longer. And for me, the payoff is fantastic, but someone might not think that. So it's really up to you whether you want to put in the time to get the results you want. In the next couple slides, we'll talk about software. So yeah, editing, it's really up to you on what kind of show you want to put together. I'll say this, if you do fiction or audio narrative, editing is mandatory. So these are the different software available. Probably there's more, but this is the most popular. There's GarageBand, which comes on every Mac. There's Adobe Audition. That's the greenish blue one on the bottom left. That's a subscription you'd have to pay for. This red circle with the H in the middle, that's called Hindenburg. Not the ideal name for a piece of software, but it's made for audio journalists. So there's a lot of little cool stuff in there. If you do field recordings, interviews, to stitch it up to, if you're doing some sort of like true crime or NPR style narrative, Hindenburg is a great option there. Audacity is open source. It's free. It's used by a ton of podcasters. It's incredibly powerful. It's been around for a long time. I still use it sometimes to strip out background audio if I don't have my iPad on me, and I'll get into that in a second. Pro Tools and Logic are two major heavy hitters. They're mostly used for music production, but I do know some people who use it for podcast production. That's if you want to go way into the weeds on your editing and sound design there. And then Ferrite. Ferrite's fairly new. It's iPad only, and my entire podcast oeuvre, so to speak, is edited on an iPad. So Homework and The Shelf Life are both edited completely on my iPad Pro in Ferrite. A lot of people won't like that, working on a small screen like that or with a different kind of app than what they're used to. But Ferrite is designed specifically for podcasters and has some incredible tools. And I will say, using the Apple Pencil to sort of, swipe and delete and move stuff around is really fast and easy for me now. So I've built up a really great workflow in Ferrite. And if you have an iPad and you're looking to try it out, it's really worth looking at. So there might be some other stuff you need if you're doing a podcast. For example, if you're doing an interview show, you might need Skype. I recorded all of my interviews for Covered, and I record all of my episodes for Homework on Skype. Perfect for remote interviews. You can also use Zoom. The reason I use Skype is because I have a plugin on my Mac for Ecamm Call Recorder. And what that does is that automatically records the entire conversation in one audio track, and then it records my audio in a separate track, and then my co-host sends me his audio. So when I was doing Covered, I would use one audio track because the authors usually didn't record their own side. But for Homework, he sends me his audio, and I stitch it all together at the end. So, Skype gives you a lot of ways to record your audio using plugins, and it does work for Mac, Windows, and you can't record on mobile, but you can talk on mobile if you're recording on a different device. Music and sound effects. So you might want an intro song or an outro. You might want some sort of interstitial music between segments. Be careful about licenses. You can't just throw in a Beatles song and be good to go, because you will get some sort of request to get that taken down. So there are websites out there, Pond5, I think it's pond5.com and storyblocks.com. Those are where I went to find music and sound effects for my show. I think all of my laugh tracks came from Pond5 and the intro music as well. And then a lot of my sound effects for the shelf life came from storyblocks.com. Storyblocks is great because it's like $10 a month and you get, or $15 a month, and you get as many downloads as you want. And then Pond5 is more a la carte, where you would download what you need for, it might be $2, it might be $5, or $30, depending on what kind of song or sound effect you're looking for. And then a digital audio recorder. So I know some people who record, maybe they're recording on their iPad, which doesn't allow you to record a conversation over Skype. So they'll hook a whole bunch of stuff up into a digital audio recorder like this. It's great also for mobile interviews. If you're on the road and you want to record yourself and someone else in a diner, this is a great way to do it. You can plug in, if you see on the side here, there are little XLR cable inputs. So you can take external microphones with you, plug them in, adjust the gain with these little dials here, record onto an SD card or a hard drive, and be good to go. This is a mobile recording studio right here. And these range anywhere between $300 and $500 if you look on Amazon. So marketing has changed in a lot of ways. And the last time I did this presentation, I didn't even have a slide on marketing because it's such a Wild West. And it sort of is still. You can have the website. The website's great if you're going to give it to people and they know, where to go. Put it on a sticker, put it on a business card, put it on Google, all that stuff. But really, a lot of your marketing will probably be focused on social media. Twitter is very popular for podcasters, and they tend to use hashtags like Podern Family or audio drama or podcasts, and people will save those searches for those hashtags and look for new things. It doesn't always work, but you might get some retweets, you might get some likes, just ways to boost the name of the show. And you also might want to create a separate account for your show. The Shelf Life has a Twitter account. Homework has a Twitter account. So when new episodes come out, those get automatically tweeted out on those accounts. So let's say someone wants to follow your show, but they don't want to follow you and all the stuff you have to say. They'll follow the show account, and then they know they're only going to get episode updates when those come out. There's Facebook. I'm in a couple of, I have a Facebook page for the Shelf Life. I'm also in a Facebook group for a couple of podcasts that I listen to. And it really is up to whether your show lends itself to a page versus a group, or both. You know, I think every podcast can have a page and a place where you can post updates or questions and you can talk to your audience, but also a group gives you a way for the community that maybe has formed around your show to talk to each other. I listen to a podcast, it's called Erasable, and it's all about pencils and stationery. And it sounds really nerdy, and it is, but the group is fantastic, and everyone shares, you know, new pencils they have, or art they've drawn, or all, you know, advice they have for, you know, doing different things with your stationery. It's a community that has formed around this one podcast, and we talk to each other through a Facebook group. So if your show lends itself to that, by all means, go for it. Instagram is another way to market your show. The Shelf Life does have an Instagram. I was posting images of the cast as the show was going live. You know, I've sort of taken a break from it since the show is on hiatus, but you know, if your show lends itself to sharing images, maybe of your recording setup, or you know, pictures of characters you've created for a fiction podcast, or maybe an image of a picture of you with someone you're interviewing and you want to post it up on Instagram. That's a great way to get the word for the show out. And again, use hashtags. Anything to broaden the scope of who sees these posts and can share it or can interact and engage with it. And then there are ads. I don't have a lot of experience with ads. From what I've heard and talked to people with Facebook and Instagram ads, it's hit or miss. I think Instagram works a little more, it works a little better than Facebook. Facebook is sort of all over the map. Google ads, I wouldn't advise on. Those have changed quite a bit in the last 10 years. But social media ads like Facebook, Instagram, maybe Twitter, it's something to experiment with. You know, maybe you want to throw 15, 20 bucks into the pot and see how your ads perform. It's something to try out. I wouldn't suggest it first starting out. Maybe it's something once you start building a little momentum, you realize you're going to do this for more than a couple of weeks, then you want to start exploring ads and ways to broaden your audience. Go for it. But, you know, it is another way to get word for the show out there. And reviews. Reviews are extremely important. Um, it is almost impossible to get people to leave reviews for anything. And so I am constantly imploring on Twitter, on Facebook, to leave reviews for the show whenever, you know, whenever I can. And also in the show itself, at the end, when we sign off on homework, it's always please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast downloaded. It's a way for people to see whether they'll like the show, reading a review, or it will also be a way to elevate the show in the rankings. The more reviews the show has, the better it does. At least that's what I've heard. So, you know, when you make your show, tell people if you like us or if you don't like us, whatever, leave a review. It can only help. So we're going to wrap this up and talk best practices. Consistency is everything. Consistency in show length, consistency in delivery, in scheduling. Make sure you have a plan. And you can announce this on Twitter. You can say when your show first goes up, thank you for listening. We're going to be here every Monday at 12 p.m. and stick to it. And, you know, hold yourself to that deadline. You know, by announcing it, maybe you'll light a fire under your tuchus to really get the show out there on its schedule. And like I said, make sure if it's half an hour one week, it's within that range the next week. Because if you keep bouncing around, you're going to turn off a lot of people who wanted to listen to something on their commute and suddenly can't listen to it because it's now 3 times as long as it was. Pod fade. Pod fade is a word people use to describe people who start podcasting and then fade out after a couple of episodes. If you think this is something you want to do professionally or as a sort of a prosumer hobby, you know, it's going to have to last more than a couple of episodes. Maybe that means you need to rework your idea to be a little more broad. Maybe it means you need to carve some time out in your schedule to make sure that you can put the show together and release it on time each week. And it should be a topic that you know you're not going to tire talking about. So don't fall into the pod fade trap. Length of show, that's like I said before. Do's and don'ts. This is a funny one. There was one podcast I used to listen to where the guy would take a big, refreshing bite of apple on microphone at the beginning of every show, and it was absolutely infuriating to listen to. I don't advocate eating on the show. Drinking is fine if you're gonna, have a sip of water to refresh yourself as you're talking, but I can't stress this enough. Don't eat on microphone. It's really unbecoming. It doesn't sound good to the ears. It's this misophonia stuff. Ugh, it's not good. Be prepared. If you're interviewing someone, if you're talking to someone you've never talked to before, do a little research. Have questions prepared. Make sure you're not winging it. Even if it's supposed to sound like a conversation, make sure you have notes to reference when things get slow or if you start running out of things to talk about organically. Know when to stop. I can't tell you how many times I've heard on a show where someone says, "So, anything else you want to talk about?" When you get to that point, it's time to stop. You don't need to talk for 3 hours. Maybe you only need to talk for an hour and a half and stick to that time. So know when to end your show so you're not meandering for 20 minutes at the end. And show notes. Show notes are very important. Show notes go into the iTunes descriptions. They go on the website. Show notes will tell people what the episode is about. It might have links if you're talking about products you've discussed or articles you've read. You want to put those links in the show notes. And they're great ways for to enhance accessibility for maybe someone who wants to know, like, let's say they're hearing impaired, they can't listen to the show. You might want to include a transcript of what was discussed in the show so that they can read it. So show notes are a great way to enhance the depth of the show and what you talk about, and give people an insight as to what they're going to hear about in the show. And above all else, content matters most. So you can have okay audio quality. People will put up with that, but they will not put up with bad content. So just make sure what you're putting out there is high quality. Whatever high quality is for you, make sure you stick to that, and you don't just sort of throw up a conversation out there, that you had with your buddies, and it's one of those, oh, this should be the show kind of thing. You need to put some effort into it, I think, to really get the most out of it and to build a really good audience. So I'm going to go through the questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So someone said towards the top here, let's see. Are podcasts suitable for business? Yes, actually, I used to work for a law firm who wanted to get into podcasting, and podcasts are a great way to get into business. It's a great way to amplify the knowledge of someone in a business, maybe a CEO or a lawyer or someone with some expertise. Podcasts are a great way to expound on that knowledge. Actually, Richard Shue, who used to be a lawyer at the firm I worked for, he went independent, but he had a show where he would talk to all sorts of different people. He talked to lawyers, he talked to Mark Cuban, he talked to Will Shortz at the New York Times. He built a show and a brand for himself with this podcast beyond the firm, but he showed that he was a great interviewer and a great person to talk to, and he built all of these connections because of it. So if you want to enhance the visibility of your business, if you want to enhance the visibility of a person within your business and what they know and show people what they know, podcasts are fantastic. And like I said before, they're relatively low overhead. You can get a podcast going on, $150 and you're off to the races. What do you think of Anchor as a host? Is it exclusive only to Spotify? Any thoughts on Spotify for podcasting? I don't know a whole lot about Anchor. I don't know if it's exclusive only for Spotify. I do know a lot of people use it because it's pretty easy to just get up and going. I think you can just record right into your phone and throw it up on Anchor. I can't speak to visibility and whether a lot of shows are successful on Anchor. But if you want to sort of kick the tires on podcasting and check it out, not horrible to look at Anchor. Spotify for podcasting, I do get listens through Spotify for the shelf life. I don't like listening to podcasts on Spotify. It's a weird thing. Like if you put a playlist on shuffle, not a playlist, if you put on like a morning rush playlist on shuffle, the ones that Spotify curates for you, you might get a podcast in between 2 or 3 songs, and it's just sort of weird and off-putting because I wasn't ready to listen to an hour of news in between my songs. So I don't usually listen to podcasts on Spotify. I know they're going a little more exclusive with podcasts. They're starting to bring their own intellectual property into it. And so they might be pushing that a little more. I don't know how much visibility you're going to get from Spotify the way you might on iTunes. So that's something to consider as well. What computer startup equipment do you recommend purchasing to begin? You can podcast on anything. You can podcast on an iPhone, on an iPad, on any kind of computer. You just need to have a microphone. Don't use the internal mic on your computer. Don't use the internal mic on your iPhone. They're not only extremely sensitive, the quality is also really terrible. Do invest in some kind of mic, even if it's something as simple as the ear pods or AirPods if you have them, something that has a dedicated headphone and a separate microphone. That's fine, but just don't use the internal mics. If you're starting from nothing, no previous equipment or computer. So yeah, I mean, you don't need to go out and get a $2,000 computer. You can do this on, if you're using something like Anchor or Spreaker, you could feasibly do this on a Chromebook. You don't need a MacBook Pro to podcast. I use a 2015 MacBook Air as my main machine for recording homework, and it's been fine. It's still a great workhorse. How do you keep your audience engaged? What mediums are best to do so? Audience is tricky. I will say social media, Twitter, if you're trying to get people to engage with you, Twitter is very passive. It's people scroll by, they don't really pay attention. Even if you get a couple retweets, it's not really where people go to engage. When I had published my debut novel, I was trying to get people to buy it, and it was like $3 on the Nook or on Kindle, and like I couldn't get arrested. It's not a place to go where you want people to really engage with your work. But if you want them to see you, there's really no better place than Twitter. Keeping your audience engaged really comes down to consistency, putting out a quality show on a set basis, on a set schedule. That is the best way to build consistency. Maybe you want to start a newsletter to help boost your subscriber rates and get more information out about the show. So you have a newsletter that comes out every week or every other week about the show, or who you're going to have on, and maybe some inside knowledge about something you're talking about. That might be a way to better engage your audience, because an email list, people who have opted in to subscribe to you, those are the people who are going to pay the closest attention and are going to act on what they get and engage with your content. Website. I firmly believe that a website is a great way to just have a set brand for your show. You can make the website look the way you want. It can be the window into your show that it needs to be, as opposed to using just like the basic Libsyn podcast show page. Do you feel like crossover episodes between podcasts actually boost audience numbers? Yes and no. I think if if you host a show about cooking and you bring on someone who's all about tech marketing, no, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of crossover audiences. But if you have two cooking podcasts that cross with each other, yeah, because you're bringing one audience over that's interested in it to your show who may not have heard of you. And then when that person shares that link to your show on Twitter or Facebook or wherever, they're going to tell their audience, hey, I was on the show. It was, interesting for me to talk to this person. You should listen to it. So yeah, if you're related in topic and in message and goal, then yeah, crossover episodes are fantastic because you're basically blending audiences together and you might pick up some new listeners. Anything else? Can you generate revenue? Yes, you can generate revenue. I know some people who've done Patreon. I used to have a Patreon for Covered. It's not something I recommend right off the bat. Don't go into podcasting thinking you're going to make a ton of money. You might make a couple of bucks each month to help pay for hosting costs. If you're looking to make ad revenue, podcast listening was down at the beginning of the pandemic because people weren't commuting anywhere. It seems that people have adjusted their listening patterns, and so listens and downloads are going up again. But advertisers are still a little skittish around advertising on certain podcasts. So until you build up a really big enough audience to woo an advertiser to your show, really focus on building up that audience first, and then asking yourself what would be best for them. Maybe it's a newsletter that they subscribe to, or maybe it's an extra show that they subscribe to for a couple of bucks a month that you put out just for them. Or maybe you want to supply a Patreon where they'll get a sticker and they'll get an extra show and a whole bunch of other stuff if they give you $5 or $10 a month. One show I listen to, Print Run, they're a publishing podcast. It's hosted by 2 literary agents. For $8 a month, you get access to extra shows they record on how to write a query letter, how to write your first pages with examples. So, they put out extra content for extra money, and that's how they're making revenue on their show. They don't have advertisers. So that's one way to do it. What's important about podcasting? I don't know. It feels like something people have been doing, especially lately, because they've had time at home to do it. Podcasting like I said, it's a great way to get information or that you want to share, or a passion that you have out there to the world. Podcasting is, like I said, relatively low overhead. You can create a show tonight and release it tonight and start advertising it tonight if you really want to. Or you can hone it over the next couple of weeks and really get it solid and build up an audience over time. It's up to you, but podcasting is probably the easiest way to share knowledge right now, outside of like recording yourself on camera and uploading it to YouTube. Well, thank you everyone for listening. This has been wonderful, great questions, and please listen to my shows.
Yeah, thank you, Harry, so much for presenting. What people, funny thing is, as you said, it was a dark and stormy night when we had you there a few years ago.
Yeah,
so we stayed through. No, maybe you never know. But everyone's had some great questions. Do you have contact information, like where they could find you on social media or your podcast? I have the link to Shelf List, but do you have any other ways if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at HCMarks. You can find the Shelf Life at shelflifesit.com. You can find Homework at 5by5.tv/homework. And yeah, those are the 3 big ones.
They are also listed. Some of those are listed on our library website in the event listing for this. So thank you everyone for coming. Be safe and be well.
Thank you.